Welcome back to The Making of, hosted by Jack Pitts. Today, we're talking with Shane Crocker. He's a partner and CFO at Alpha Tanks and Pump Distribution. They're a industry leader in tanks, pumps, and fittings for the oil and gas industry. Shane's journey spans family businesses, healthcare, franchising, and oilfield services, where he scaled companies, led teams, and navigated private equity partnerships. In this episode, Shane shares how he makes strategic decisions, drives business growth, builds strong teams, and balances work with family, plus lessons you can apply to your own entrepreneurial journey. Let's dive into it, and I can't wait for you to listen to my conversation with Shane. Awesome. Hey, Shane, how you doing? Thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Glad to be here.
How's the Monday going?
As well as a Monday could go, I guess. Had some few fires this morning, but got those under control and good to go now.
What was what were you dealing with?
One of our shops out in West Texas. One of our managers got out there and it's a complete mess. We had parts everywhere and these guys not doing their job.
Yeah, that's not no fun the way to start Monday.
No.
What do you actually do in that scenario? Like, are you, on the phone? Are you going out to the stores? Like, obviously you're one of the partners there, so you kind of have to deal with it.
Yeah, luckily we have pretty fairly defined swim lanes. So my side of the house is pretty much all accounting, back office functions. So I usually get to punt that to my brother-in-law, who's the CEO and my partner, and he handles all the people issues. So
Yeah,
I don't have to deal with that too much hands-on.
hey, just let you do the books and make sure
That's right.
the cash flowing and leave it up to your brother-in-law. And how is that doing, business with you or with your brother-in-law? Like I'm potentially thinking of doing something with my brother, in the future. So, it's definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think luckily we both kind of grew up around family businesses. He did as well, so we kind of knew the dynamics coming in. Out of the gate, it could be a little rocky, trying to figure out how everybody works best. Tough conversations. But once you get kind of through those hurdles, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, definitely. And taking it a little back, where did you grow up? I know you went to Louisiana Tech for college, but it'd be great for the audience just to kind of, paint the picture where you grew up. I know you said you kind of grew up in family businesses, so if you had any experience with that, that'd be super, super helpful.
Yeah, I grew up in North Louisiana, just south of Shreveport, much closer to East Texas than most people think about Louisiana. They think Baton Rouge, New Orleans. But I'm pretty far removed from South Louisiana. It's much more East Texas, where I grew up. Went to high school in Louisiana. Decided to stay in Louisiana for college. Actually went to LSU Shreveport my freshman year, tried to play a little baseball. Realized how slow my hands were and transferred out to Louisiana Tech. Grew up, like I said, around family businesses. All my grandparents, aunts and uncles, both my parents, everybody kind of owned their own business. My dad is a utility contractor, so all the people that I, kind of grew up around that was successful were engineers. So I thought naturally I wanted to be an engineer. So I went to Louisiana Tech for engineering. Realized pretty quick that those guys are much smarter than me. So I had to find something that, was a little bit easier for me to digest and understand. Luckily, parents were financially somewhat savvy. So I grew up kind of understanding money coming in, money going out. So that's kind of where I migrated towards, was the finance side of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what were your kind of first jobs growing up? Did you work in any of the family businesses?
Oh yeah, nonstop. So first job's actually on our family farm. So my grandfather was retired military. When he got done in the military, he went to work for a insurance agent in Shreveport. Ended up buying that business from him and owned the insurance brokerage for a number of years. As far back as I can remember, he would work a couple days a week, but for the most part was semi-retired. So we grew up kind of working with him on the family farm. We'd get up and go out and work in the morning, come home and eat breakfast, go work in the afternoon, come home and swim the rest of the day. So that's kind of how I got my feet wet. And then obviously, as I got older, I did a lot with my dad's construction company. My mom owned a flower shop, so I spent a lot of time in the flower shop, helping make deliveries, especially during Valentine's and all those crazy holidays. So we were always in the mix doing something.
Yeah, that's really interesting just with your family, kind of being all entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. What do you think it was with your family? Just hey, like this is the way how things are, or like it's kind of interesting. Like no one in my family is, quote unquote, an entrepreneur. So I feel like some people just have that bone, and must have been someone in your family.
Yeah, I think it's that as well as somewhat out of necessity. So nobody in my family's has a college degree. Everybody kind of came out of high school, and you really went to work for one of the two big employers in the area, um, or if you really wanted to be able to kind of be above, keep your head above water. A lot of times you kind of started your own business. So a lot of times it was kind of out of necessity. So they all kind of found their niche and just went at it and took a little bit of risk, but they knew they could make more, working for themselves than they could, working for somebody else. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Just taking that risk and out of necessity. I feel like a lot of kids these days, and myself included, it's like you go to these good schools and you go into these corporate jobs, which they're great. You can learn a lot, and it's great training ground. And I know you started in a corporate job as what a community loan officer, but like just incredible that your family did it out of necessity, and that's more valuable than actually going to a top school. It's the school of hard knocks.
yeah, I don't think I had really any desire to go in business for myself. Once I graduated college, the plan was the corporate track. So I came out of school, went to work for a small bank. But my dad's always told me, you always have a job. So, I kind of had one of those fallback plans that, hey, if this doesn't work out, I've got something to fall back on. So, I never came out of school with the intention of doing my own thing. So,
Why was that? I know obviously you studied finance at Louisiana Tech. You were drawn to numbers, kind of always understood that growing up, but what kind of made you go, want to go to the Community Bank of Louisiana, be a loan officer?
yeah, I think it's what drives me to be an entrepreneur today. The adage that I kind of live by is, I work 80 hours a week, so I don't have to work a typical 8 to 5, right? So when I was in college, my parents worked all the time, so I wanted to go work that 8 to 5. I thought the best thing was to be able to go in at 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock. I'd turn my phone off and I get to have fun, right? And it took me a while to realize that you work so hard because the freedom of time is very valuable. So.
What do you mean the freedom of time? Like, hey, you're working your ass off Monday through Friday, or even Monday through Saturday. You just want to take up a Friday off. Like you can do that. Like, well, what do you kind of mean there?
I play golf Tuesday to Thursday, walk 9 holes.
Yeah.
I take 2 hours every day to go walk 9 holes. So, I get up in the morning, work a little bit, get the kids to school, go walk 9 holes, come back and work a little bit, pick them up from school. After they go to bed, I work again. But I control when I work and what I have to do. So I've got my checklist of items that are, priority that have to be done ASAP, and some things I can punt, to the next day. Uh, I think corporate America's a little bit more time free, especially post COVID, with people working from home and kind of control their schedule a little bit better. But when I was out of college, that wasn't the case. I mean, you were in the office, for the most part, 8 to 5. So I just like having control of my own schedule.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. And I just graduated in May, and I'm getting accustomed to all of that, and it's definitely something that you can't learn in school, and I'm just trying to kind of adapt to that right now. So that's been a learning curve to me, and we're able to work from home one day a week, but it's almost like you can almost work around the clock, given that
Absolutely.
computer, the work from home setup. So it's almost like never ending sometimes.
I mean, we didn't get a cell phone or an iPhone till probably 2007, maybe when this came out. I'm not real sure. So prior to that, I mean, you might have had a cell phone, but the freedom of information wasn't near as accessible as it is now. So things have changed a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And that also must just be so nice. When it was like 2001 to 2004, you're just, hey, you're working your ass off for those 8 hours. But after that, hey, you can't probably even contact me because, you know, I don't have a computer. Did you have a laptop computer in
Uh,
2000? I don't know if that's crazy or not.
yeah, no, I had a laptop. I was trying to think. I mean, we had dial-up internet when I was in college, my sophomore year. We didn't start getting high-speed stuff till junior, senior year in college, probably. So things have definitely uh, transitioned quickly. Uh, but at a small community bank, I mean, we closed the doors at 3 o'clock. So I was always pretty aggressive and fast working. So I was out of there about 3:15, 3:30. So I had the entire rest of the day to goof off. There really was no work that had to be done, at night in that environment. As I left there, went to some other, career paths. Definitely had to work more at night, but right out of the gate in the bank, it was 9 to 3, and I was done.
Yeah, that must have been super nice. Like, what do you even get up to if you're, off of work? Probably home. Can go to the gym by 4:30. Like, can be done by 5:30. Like, what did you get up to for those 2 years post work?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any money, so I didn't have a TV at the house. No cable TV, so I'd get home and work out, run a little bit, hang out by the pool. So it was go to Barnes and Noble, read some free books, that type of stuff.
Hey, you're making it work. That's
That's
awesome.
it. That's it. That's the downside of the community bank. They don't pay very well.
Yeah, and what did you learn there? And obviously, you were there for 2 years, and you went to the Kirchman Corporation.
Yeah.
But like, was it formative in your learning and kind of like how you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. They actually was very generous. I worked for them the summer before my senior year in college, and they actually paid me through my senior year in college, gave me a salary, and paid for some of my tuition. So I felt somewhat obligated to kind of go back, and work for them. But learned a lot. Had a lot of freedom as a you know young kid, really no experience at all. I was able to come out and make loans, and we didn't have underwriting. We were doing our own underwriting basically, so we had a lot of flexibility and freedom to make decisions. Again, a small town. I knew a lot of people coming in to ask me for money. They were parents of my friends type thing. So you learned a lot. You learned a lot of how to read people. The boss I had was really great at the time. He was he went to LSU, Baton Rouge. Was president of his fraternity. Kind of big, big personality type guy. So learned quite a bit from him, how to manage people, how to read people, how to understand kind of what drives them, how to motivate them, things like that. So it was a really good experience, out of the gate. It was much better opportunity than I probably could have had going to like a big four accounting firm or something like that. So worked out well for me.
Definitely, just the hands-on experience, and must have been just a cool opportunity. Just getting to hear these businesses that are local, and it's just like, hey, I want some money. Any crazy ones you remember where it's just like you got to get out of your mind?
Yeah, there was lots of crazy ones. Probably the probably one of the craziest ones. Some guy that was wanted to buy a lawnmower. He mowed businesses. He was probably, I don't know, he was 70 years old probably. Still mowing grass. Hot Louisiana summers, and his lawnmower blew up and needed a loan for a lawnmower, and it was like $700 or something. But it was interesting that the guy couldn't read or write. He actually left his mark, like an X. That's how he signed his loan documents. So that was kind of a unique experience.
Yeah.
But I had other entrepreneurs coming in wanting to start businesses. Had a gentleman that was a serial entrepreneur, but somehow got hooked up with doing testing, soil testing, and needed a fairly sizable loan to be able to buy the equipment for that. And I was able to put that together and get him a business doing that. Did real well for himself. So there's a lot of success stories where we were able to kind of put something together that that work for, entrepreneurs. And that was a lot of our book of business. It was a lot of, drywall guys, construction guys, small business owners that really needed, some hand holding that big banks just wouldn't touch.
Yeah, and that also must just be so cool, like local community, like seeing it make a difference, especially with that, the guy who's testing soil. He probably did great for himself and sold the business, hopefully in
Yep.
the future, to a
Yep.
private equity firm and made good
Yeah, no
money.
kidding.
So yeah, that's awesome. And so you're there for 2 years, and then you end up going to the Kirchman Corporation. What kind of was? Why'd you make that move?
Yeah, so the Kurtzman Corporation actually was basically the system that ran a lot of these community banks. So they were based out of Orlando. I'd actually been to their office a couple of times for different things. We were testing some different technologies. During that time with the community bank was really a transition period where they were taking a lot of paper documents and making the bank more electronic. Prior to me getting there, they didn't have online banking. So that was kind of a huge transition that I got to kind of put my stamp on, pretty early on. So spent quite a bit of time in Orlando testing out some new functionalities they had coming. I was honestly tired of living in a small town. Wasn't married at the time. Wasn't dating anybody, at that time. Had some buddies that said they were going to move to Nashville, and me and my roommate from college said, "Hey, we're going to Nashville." So I quit my job, and I think a couple of days before we moved to Nashville, the other buddies backed out. So we had a good friend from college who was in Orlando said, "Hey, I'll move to Orlando, and I'll get a bigger apartment. We can all, figure it out." So packed up, moved to Orlando, and the CEO of the bank called me and said, "Hey, you found a job yet?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, go over to the Kurtzman Corporation. I've told him you're coming over there." So he actually hooked me up with a job, and another great experience. I was working on a team that traveled to implement the technology. So they would actually send us to a location. It would probably be a month long, maybe 2 month, period to integrate this technology. They would send us somewhere. We'd work a week. We'd stay there a weekend. We'd work a next week. And then the following weekend, they would send us wherever we wanted to go. They'd fly us wherever we wanted to go. So I got to travel quite a bit, go to a lot of cool locations. And the off weekends, when we were technically still at the place, we'd go to the nearest big city. If we were in Michigan, we'd go to Chicago, spend the weekend in Chicago. So it was a great experience. I was young, got to travel quite a bit. It was fun.
Yeah, that must have been an awesome experience getting to travel and meet with people in person. I feel like a job like that nowadays is probably honestly not even existent.
It probably isn't. I mean, a lot of those implementations are probably just done virtual at this point, but it was very hands on at the time. I mean, we were making sure things were balancing out, doing trial conversions. Then we'd convert over a weekend and go live and have to be there for a couple of weeks after they went live just to make sure everybody knew how to use the system correctly. And, we were training them several weeks up into that point. But, it was the full system that ran the entire, back office functions for these banks. So it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, especially just, the time that you were there, transitioning from, paper documents, into, online banking, which is something that, I've never not had. So incredible to think you were there, right at the start of it and, probably got to build some great relationships, go to some cool cities and, get to be in a cool part of like the corporate ecosystem.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When I was at the community bank and we were trying to convince the board that we needed an online banking system, I used to get exposure to those board meetings. So I'd come in and make different presentations. And one of the board members at the time said, "What do we need? What do we need internet banking for? Nobody's going to use that. What do you want that for?" And I said, "Well, for guys like myself that don't make very much money, you want to be able to pull up real time and see, hey, do I have $100 to go out tonight or not?" And that got everybody kind of laughing, and we ended up convincing them that online banking was the future, and they moved that direction. But prior to that, these board members are like, "Hey, we're not doing this. What's the point of online banking?" So pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's like definitely just like the old school, you know, corporate loans,
Yeah,
hey, non-risk. Crazy to think that, you have to go into a boardroom to convince someone. And it's like
Yeah,
Shane's, in his early 20s, this guy's a nut job, but in reality, if they didn't, who knows what happened to that bank,
that's
honestly.
right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you were there for about a year, and then you kind of made the jump to Edward Jones. Tell me about that. Like a year's, relatively quick in the corporate world, but kind of like where were you at there?
Yeah, it was my passion's always been finance. A good buddy of mine ran a Edward Jones office in Minden, Louisiana, and he called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we're expanding our office. I want you to come get tested and work for your it'll get you back, closer to family, and it'll be a good experience for you." So, uh, again, just said, let's do it, and left back for Louisiana. Got licensed Series 7, 63, 65, all the life insurance stuff. And Edward Jones is a fun company. Out of the gate, you basically don't cold call. Back in the day, you said knock on doors. So you'd go around and you'd start at the top of the street and you just knock on doors, and introduce yourself and basically say, I'm, new to the community. I've got a small business here and we've got some great investments. And if you have some time, I'd love to sit and chat with you. So you kind of start from zero and work your way up.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just door to door knocking. One of my friends is a broker in Atlanta for like commercial real or industrial real estate, and he does a lot of like hot knocking. And he's like, dude,
Yep.
that's how I get my best leads. Just going out there, shaking people's hand. And a lot of other people that I've interviewed, like similar entrepreneurs to you, they just get their start in sales because you're getting rejected so many times. Get out of my face. You're annoying. I don't want your service, but just keep being persistent and keep coming back because, hey, for every like the best answers or the worst answer is no answer. At least if
That's
you have
right.
a no, you can go to the next person and, hey, a new prospect there.
Yeah, and in that business, I mean, you eat what you kill type thing. So if you're not knocking on doors and getting people to buy, you're going to starve. So pretty good motivation.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So and you're there, you're building your own book of business, and then I'm presuming, like selling them products as well. Is it more wealth management or like a hey, here's a life insurance policy?
Yeah, it was much more wealth management at the time. It was we're selling a lot of mutual funds, a lot of A share mutual funds. Today, most stuff's managed money where you pay an incremental fee on a monthly basis for somebody to manage your money. But the big product when I was doing it was A share mutual funds. Somebody would retire, they would have $1 million in a 401k. You'd basically roll that 401k into an IRA. You would take some money up front as the A share fee, and then you just kind of manage that money for them. But it was a one time hit, and then you had to go knock on some more doors and get the next money coming in. Now these guys they pick up they get a good book of business and it's just recurring revenue. So it's a much better model today than it was when I was in it for the brokers. Um, I'm assuming it's just as good for the end user, but at the time we were selling A shares, as best we could.
Yeah, yeah. How did you like that job? Was it kind of what you wanted to do? I know you said it's more finance.
Yeah, it was a great job. I probably would have stayed with Jones. I had a pretty good book of business that was being built at the time, um, but I fell in love, and when you fall in love, you start doing crazy stuff. So uh, that kind of had me move, from Louisiana to Texas. So
Yeah, yeah. So you were working there for 2 years, fell in love, and then I saw you went to was it Chase for a year or a little stint being an investment rep.
yeah, I worked at Chase for a little while. Spent a little time at Bank of America as well. My wife's a veterinarian. She and I met before she got into vet school, and then I moved to College Station when she got into vet school, and that was the easiest, kind of 9 to 5 gig um, that I was able to step into, and we got married between her freshman and sophomore year of vet school, so that was a way for us to be able to eat and put a roof over our head while she was in vet school.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. And how did you guys meet? Have to ask.
We both worked at a camp during the summers in college and had some mutual friends. So I was at Louisiana Tech, had some friends who were working at the same camp she was at. I was at a different camp, but um, was bored one weekend and had a buddy call and said, "Hey, we're going to a wedding in San Antonio. Do you want to come? I actually went and crashed the wedding. I was, I guess, the original wedding crasher. But it was funny. They called her, and she crashed the same wedding. So we were two people that knew absolutely nobody there besides our mutual friends. So we got to spend a lot of time together hanging out, and just kind of worked out.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah,
The two original wedding crashers,
that's it.
now married and have kids. And so what was it like moving to College Station? I've only heard, very interesting things about it, like it's a cult.
It's 100% a cult. But you know what? I love it. That's a great place. I mean, the atmosphere around there. Everybody's an Aggie, pro Aggies. Football games are amazing. The food's good. All the people are nice. It's a great place. I'd love to retire there at some point. It'd be a great place to go back to.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. I mean, I feel like college towns are great places to
Yeah.
retire. My grandpa lived in Knoxville for a bit.
Oh yeah, Knoxville's great.
Yeah, it's a great town. It's like, there's stuff to do, there's sports, you'll get good concerts here and there, and you know, there's it's not going to be a ghost town, maybe a little
That's
bit in the
right.
summer, but there'll always be people. So were you working at Bank of America while you were there, or is that when you're at UT?
Yeah, yeah. I was at Bank of America and Chase. Kind of split some time between the two of them. I think I was at Bank of America first, actually, and then Chase. Uh, but spent some time at both of those. Just big, big banks. You're kind of a small fish in a really big pond with
Hmm.
those guys. Both great organizations, just not a good fit for me. Uh, so I had opportunity to go transition into healthcare. It's kind of a unique job, but my father-in-law actually spent his entire career in healthcare. He did a lot of the M&A work for Tenet Healthcare, bought and sold hospitals, throughout the '90s. So I had quite a bit of conversations with him about healthcare and the upward trajectory, kind of the industry. So had opportunity to go work for University of Texas Medical Branch, who had the contract to manage hospitals inside of the prisons. So I had several hospitals inside of the prison system that I managed. Doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, A's, like dentist, a little bit of everything. Kind of inside the four walls of the prison system. So that was a fun experience.
Yeah, that must have been incredibly interesting. I can't even imagine. You probably just know some random stuff about
Oh man, there's some stories.
any good ones worth
Uh,
sharing.
some we probably can't put on a podcast, but yeah, there's lots of really unique experiences there. So we had to you couldn't bring a cell phone in. They basically frisked us. Going in the gate. We had a telephone line to get out, but it was only in our offices. Internet was kind of locked down, so once you got in there, you were there. It's kind of a unique environment. The process is around more of access to care as opposed to quality. If that makes sense. I mean, not to say they got bad quality, but it was really based on access. So if somebody submitted a request to be seen, you had to see them within. I'm gonna make up a time frame, maybe 24 hours or whatever the time frame was. So they would put in the request. You have to get them in to be seen, and then depending on what the need was, we would send them off site or we'd do some telemedicine, et cetera. So lots of mental health issues inside the prisons. So I saw a lot of crazy stuff around that. We actually had a ward inside of our hospital. It was basically a glass, cell, and they had really cold air that they would pump into there, and you'd have a lot of people claim that they were having psychotic episodes, and you'd put them in there, um, and you'd really tell then was it something mental health issue we need to send them off site for, or were they just trying to get out of being at work? So we saw a lot of very unique things in that place.
Yeah, yeah, I can't even imagine, what it's like, working and supporting, or even just like the guards and the doctors that are in there. That must just be a crazy experience.
Yeah, I mean, you had geriatric patients. You had patients that have been in there forever in wheelchairs. I mean, it was almost like a nursing home in a couple of my units. So it was a broad spectrum of care that we had to provide, and again, make sure everybody had access and got the quality of care they needed. So it was a unique experience, and again, going back to learning how to manage, people, because a lot of people that worked in there maybe aren't the cream of the crop. So having to get, motivate them the best you could. And then again, trying to figure out how to get all these people access in a timely manner was problematic at times.
Yeah, definitely. Like managing those people, and yeah, like I said, probably not the cream of the crop, but got to work with, the cards that you're dealt with.
Hmm.
And like at this time, you're what, like 29, 28? Is that
I
right?
don't think I was that old. This was probably, so my wife graduated in '09 from vet school. This was probably 2008. So I
Okay,
was probably,
27.
yeah, 26, 27.
Yeah, what are you like? Where's your head at? Just like in your career, are you kind of just like, hey, I'm liking this, like, I'm happy with where I'm at. Like, did you have a plan? I feel like people have these plans. I don't really know what I want to do in the future, but like, where was your head at there?
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, right? I was kind of the same way at that time. It was a unique time. I knew there was a stop date. This was kind of a plan to get us through vet school, and then I figured I could kind of concentrate on my career. Once my wife got done with vet school, so this was more of a time where I needed to make sure we could eat, make sure we had a place to sleep, and then just try to learn as much as I could to then move into my next, career. So this time frame was really about building that base to know that once she's done with vet school, then I'll start making that corporate track that I always had, kind of as my vision.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. Just trying to get through that and figure it out after there, and then after that, you joined Tenet Health. Um, what was kind of the rationale there?
Yeah, so my wife after she graduated, she was working on horses at the time, and went to California to do a residency for a year. So moved to California again, no job in sight. Just figured we would figure it out when I got there. Um, California is a unique environment where it's a lot of HMO, business where you have patients that have to be managed by a primary care physician. And there was a group that was owned by Tenet Healthcare called at the time it was called CMS. They transitioned into Conifer a little bit later, but their whole gig was managing patient populations. So they had a little bit of technology that they would use, and it was processing claims. It was getting patients in to be seen at different specialists. So I was able to kind of talk my way into a job because of my prior healthcare experience, which was pretty slim, but learned a lot about how the healthcare system works, some of the flaws inside of the healthcare system, but basically helping doctors that were taking risk for certain populations be profitable. So
Yeah, and how do you actually even do that? Like, how do you become profitable? Like, if I'm, taking a risk on a client that, maybe you can't pay me, like, I have no idea.
yeah, so they were paid on a per member per month basis. So they got a check for every patient on a monthly basis. Your patients that were healthy that never got seen by anybody, you made money. Your sick patients that were always, going to the doctor, you were losing money. So we were basically utilizing technology early on to figure out, okay, what part of the population is sick? Typically, the 80-20 rule, normally applies. 20% of that population spending 80% of your money type thing. So how do we identify those patients and then try to get them better managed? So if they're going to the ER every week, how do we get them out of the ER and get into a urgent care, type facility? Do we get them in front of a nurse on a weekly basis to make sure they're taking the medications, make sure they have access to food? Some of that could be drivers of bad health. So it's really just trying to manage that top of the population that carries all the spend. And if you can manage that, then typically those organizations would be, profitable on a smaller basis, but still profitable.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. And, I feel like just learning about the healthcare industry is just, such a beast. And so many ins and outs with Medicaid, Medicare. I can't imagine how in depth your knowledge is, because obviously after a year and a half there, or so you went to EY. You're doing a consulting, or you're senior consultant there. What kind of made you want to move there?
Again, it was based off of moves. So my wife got done with her residency, and then we're trying to figure out where do we go next. We thought about staying in California. We flipped around, maybe going to Colorado. Thought about maybe going back to Louisiana, but her family is here in Texas, so that seemed like a logical move. We knew the economy in Texas was great, so we basically just packed up, moved back to Texas for her to work, and then again I just started knocking on doors and asking around for people that were hiring, and E&Y was a good fit. Again, it was in the healthcare space, doing consulting work, and it was just a kind of a logical fit. I basically take some of my knowledge of what I was doing out in California. Um, at that time, Obamacare was starting to gain some traction. People were starting to talk a lot about, how do we implement Obamacare. So we started, kind of working down that path of how do we help outside of the state of California manage populations. So that's kind of what I was doing inside of EY. And then Conifer called me back and said, "Hey, we're expanding outside of California. This is a great environment. We want you to come back and work for us." At that time, I was the only person not in California for Conifer, and we were basically just going out trying to pitch, what we did in California to a lot of these health organizations that were wanting to take risks but didn't know how to do it. So we just started kind of hitting the ground running and trying to expand the book of business as best we could.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it seems a lot of like what you're doing, was almost sales, business development, and obviously that's what you're doing at Conifer. But business development on top of hey, I'm gonna go out and get the business, and then I'm gonna be like that project manager and you know save you money, make the company money. And I know you're there for almost 6 years, which is incredible. Would love to kind of hear about your time there, and you definitely grew it a bunch. So it'd be interesting to hear your insight there.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the kind of the operational side of the house. So I understood the operations pretty well. Once we decided we were trying to expand the business, we started building out a sales team. So we started hiring sales guys that had a lot of healthcare experience, a lot of contacts in the health space, but really didn't understand, exactly what we did. So I transitioned into more of kind of a subject matter expert and would tag team with a lot of the sales guys. So they would tee up a conversation, and then I would basically come in to really talk, nuts and bolts and close the deals. So it allowed me a lot of flexibility to basically go coast to coast. We had sales guys that owned territories, but I'd basically go coast to coast and help them close out deals. And then once we got everything inked, we'd bring our team to implement and start operationalizing, kind of what we put together. But I got to help, write a lot of those contracts because I understood kind of what the pain points were, what we were trying to fix. So still got a little taste of the operational side, but doing a lot more, kind of sales and closing deals, which was fun.
Yeah, that must have been a lot of fun, and I know you're there for a little under 6 years, and you're probably by this time married. Like kind of where was your head at just in your career, where you're like, hey, I'm just gonna kind of work my butt off here and figure out what I want to do. Was there ever anything of just like, hey, I'm gonna go do this after, like, how does
No,
that?
it was definitely just full speed ahead. I was lack of a better term, climbing the corporate ladder. Had a lot of responsibility. Was making really good money. Had a lot of freedom at that time. Um, it was a very much a growth time in my corporate career. So I was kind of on the trajectory of the path that I wanted to go. I honestly got tired of waking up in different hotel rooms, not real sure where I was, on and off of planes, and it just got to where it was just too much. I was ready to be home and sleep in home bed at night. Young kids at the house, so if it wouldn't have been for the travel, I probably would have stayed in corporate America, to be honest with you. But I think kind of the travel forced me, kind of forced my hand to pick up that entrepreneurial bug that was always kind of back there, but never really had the desire or the didn't really want to take the risk, at that time.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think nowadays, hey, like people like myself, even if you're in a sales job, you can still do that remotely.
Yeah,
Maybe you'll go into office, but I wonder if that's gonna, like discourage, entrepreneurs because, it's a good paycheck. It's you're not traveling that much. You're gonna sleep at home. Like I wonder if that will have any like downstream effects because
it's very possible. Again, if I was not having to travel, getting on and off the planes, I'd go to a meeting in California, take the red eye to New York, land, go to a meeting, type of thing. So had I not been doing that, there's a good chance that I probably would have never left, corporate America.
wow, yeah, and that's just incredible because we've sold two businesses now and just like an entrepreneur, you get to go golf whenever you
That's
want,
it.
like take your kids to school, pick them up, and just spend as much time as you want with them. That's just amazing that you did end up taking the leap. And so you were at Conifer Health for a little under 6 years, and you go to Evolent Health as a managing director. How was that?
Chasing money, bad decision. I would advise people don't chase money.
Yeah. What like also like if you don't mind me asking, like you are like a regional VP managing, now you go to managing director, like what are you kind of like making salary rise wise, just like a ballpark if you're comfortable sharing?
I was probably in the 300 range, somewhere in there.
Wow. And I mean that's obviously like incredible, especially like 2017, probably have a mortgage now, like you end up obviously working there for 10 months, and then what kind of was your last straw there?
I think I knew I made a bad decision pretty quickly after I left. So the gentleman that hired me had a pretty good relationship with, and as soon as I got there, they had a huge shuffling of people and brought in somebody else that was actually at Deloitte. She was a partner at Deloitte and came across, and she and I just wasn't a good fit. We never gelled at all, and I just knew pretty quick that it wasn't a good fit for me. Great company. In fact, I think they're getting killed right now in the stock market. At the time, their stock was trading pretty high, and they were kind of everybody was wanting to go work there. They were the Google of the healthcare space at the time. A lot of young people, a lot of really smart people, a lot of cool technology, and it was just again chasing money. But in hindsight, it was a terrible idea, terrible job for me.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, and everything works out the way it's supposed to.
Yep.
And okay, so obviously after that, you end up buying a franchise at ServPro. Is that right? Um,
I looked at several businesses to buy, and I was afraid to take the leap of just to go do it on my own. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I've always liked a franchise model. I think you pay quite a bit for those franchise fees, but a company like ServPro, they've got a huge name, and when their house floods or catches on fire or anything like that, they start Googling, and ServPro is the first thing that pops up. So in that environment, you're really paying for the marketing, you're paying for that name. So it felt right to be able to pay those franchise fees, and they had a proven model that if you follow the blueprints, you could be successful. So basically bought two territories, and they were non-existing territories, meaning they had licenses but never been worked before. So it was basically a startup. So no employees, had to go get my own lease, my own vehicles, hire employees, the whole 9 yards. So it was very much a startup, but I had the backing of a plan that I knew if I followed the plan, I'd be successful. It's kind of like walking to a college classroom. You look around and say, okay, there's 40, 50 people in here. If I'm the top, 20, I'm passing, right? And I felt the same way about a franchise. If I get a franchise model, the model's there. There's going to be a handful of people that fail because they don't follow the model. If I follow the model, I'm going to be successful. So it kind of worked out, and had a really good run at that. Was actually rookie franchisee of the year for Texas, Louisiana. Probably would have won it for the national market, but I'd sold the franchise before the next national convention. So it was fun. It was a good run. Didn't make any money, but learned a lot. So
Yeah, definitely learning's the most important thing. And how do you even go about figuring that out? Obviously, you have the franchise plan that you have to follow and probably laid out pretty good for you, but hiring people, getting a lease, being a manager, you're probably going out to these sites for the first, you know, 2 years at least, until you can get a good team under your belt.
it's a lot of hard work. They kind of sell the model as a kind of white collar role, and you're going to come build your team. It's definitely not that. I mean, it was getting called out in the middle of the night because somebody's house flooded, and my employees aren't answering their phones. I had to show up until somebody would answer the phone. So it was very much a blue collar environment that I was in, but I try to treat it as a white collar job. So again, they had their model, and I followed that model as close as I could. I knew I didn't have the expertise, especially when it came to flood environments, to know that we're doing the right thing. So I hired somebody with 30 years of experience, brought them in, overpaid them, but I knew that at least I had somebody there with knowledge that I wouldn't get myself into legal trouble because we weren't doing something right. So it was really just following the blueprint. I hit certain revenue thresholds. I'd hire another person. I'd buy a truck. That just kind of followed the model as close as I could. And I've always lived by the old adage that you hire slow, fire fast. So I take my time and make sure we hire the right person. And then if it's not working out, cut ties as fast as possible and go find somebody else. So that's kind of how we did the hiring. We got up to probably had 12 or so, 12, 15 full-time employees and some part-time help. It was a fun run.
Yeah, and that's also just crazy to think that before that you were managing director, like a healthcare consulting firm, and now you're waking up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Like that must have been a rude awakening. And also, like, another thing, obviously your wife's now a vet practicing. Was she like, hey Shane, you're freaking crazy, you're not doing this? Like, how does that work? Because that's definitely a consideration.
No, it worked out really well. She's always been very supportive of that. It's kind of a time where I supported her through vet school, wait for her to get out and get a real job, and then she kind of took over the reins and said, look, we can eat based off my salary, we're going to pay our mortgage, so if we're going to take a risk, this is the time to do it. So she was very supportive in that, and very encouraging. Hey, this is something you can do. Go do it. So without her support, and without that salary, we probably wouldn't have taken the risk. To be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's this one guy who, I'm posting an episode soon, but he was a lawyer and he was 33, and he had kids, and then he moved to Orlando, moved his whole family down there. Crazy to think about the support you have to have in your partner, because so many people could be like, okay, sorry, this is too much for me. We need to pay the mortgage, but to have someone like that, it's just an incredible blessing.
Yep, 100%.
Awesome. And so you sold your first Surf Pro, and then from there, like, you sold it. Who did you sell it to? Like another franchisee, if I'm guessing?
Yeah, that was another thing that I was looking at when I wanted to get into business for myself, is how do I get out of this, right? And the Surf Pro model, there's a lot of people looking for Surf Pros at the time. So it was really hard to get one, because every time they hit the market, somebody was buying them up pretty fast. So I knew that if I got this license and if I built something, I could always get out of it. And I had no desire to really sell at the time. We just had opportunity that we couldn't pass up. So it was one of those things that the opportunity to buy into the oil and gas company, made sense. It was an opportunity to get in business with a family and not be on kind of an island by myself. So once I had that opportunity to go that route, it just made sense to sell this. I couldn't do both. I just didn't have enough bandwidth to do both. So basically just contacted a broker that dealt only with Surf Pro franchises, told him what I had, said, look, I've only had this a couple of years, but this is what we've done. Here are my my EBITDA numbers, and just like buying a house in a cookie cutter neighborhood, he could tell you spot on what you're going to get for it. So I was able to put it on the market, and we had it sold pretty quick.
Yeah, that's awesome, and cool to think there's a broker that just does serve pros. He's probably the man, and probably does more than amazing for himself.
It's very successful, yeah, very successful.
Yeah, and what was kind of your EBITDA, like revenue numbers, like ballpark, if you remember?
I think with that business we were doing million, 1.2 top line, probably had 30% EBITDA margins, somewhere in there. They weren't, I mean, they definitely weren't bad. It's a business you can make a lot of money in if you scale it, just because you're dealing with insurance payers, and they've got set dollar amounts for every line item you can think of already plugged in. So all you do is go out and do the work, account for everything you did, and they're going to cut you a check for it. So pretty easy to kind of get some decent margins in that business.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and it's just crazy to think about, like, 1.2 million in top line revenue. That's an insane amount of money. Just to think about, even though maybe in the grand scheme of things it's not huge, but that's a lot of money, especially how much of that is actually sweat equity, where you're busting your ass to go. And I know that's a big area where private equity is trying to roll up as well.
Yeah, I mean, they came in and bought up the ServPro, the family that owned the ServPro name. I mean, it's a private company forever, and private equity came in and bought them up. And they changed the model a lot since I sold. There's a lot more people that have deep pockets that are coming in buying much larger territories. So that whole model's changed quite a bit since I sold.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just do you know what private equity firm bought them?
I think it was Sequoia. I have to double check on that.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it must have been insane for them.
Yeah, that family did really well.
Yeah, I wonder how their the business models like comparing now to when you had it. That'd be.
I still know a couple of owners, but there's a lot of small owners that just got gobbled up. They just couldn't compete with these big guys. These big guys that come into territories and just dominate the territories. So I think a lot of the small guys just got, eaten basically by the big boys. Sell now or you're gonna lose all your business type thing. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. Hopefully, they got something for their business.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, so now you join your brother-in-law at Alpha Tanks and Pump Distribution. Would love to kind of help give the audience, what is Alpha Tanks and Pump Distribution? Yeah, that'd be great to set the stage.
Yeah, so it's my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, and myself. My brother-in-law and I both married sisters. So my father-in-law and the two of us, we started Strategic Family Ventures years ago, and we basically do investments in disruptive, businesses. So we'd be early investors in, different technologies or different companies that were kind of disruptive in the market. We had talked early on about maybe, transition that into some type of family office as we grow. But Aaron and I both wanted to be hands-on in kind of the next thing. He was in the health, the human resources space. His family owned a PEO for a number of years, and he got to a point where he was ready to kind of do something on his own as well. So the opportunity presented to him. It was family friends that had started the business. They had actually had a couple of offices, one in Fort Worth that was fairly successful. They had partnered up with another guy out in San Antonio, gave him 50% of the business, and that one was doing pretty well. They decided to start up the distribution company, which is basically going to be a LLC to manufacture their own tanks, and they would sell to these two locations and sell to other potential buyers outside of Texas. And that company at the time when we came in, I think they started in 2012, was just barely hanging on. They put some money into it, and it just wasn't really doing much at all. They had a vision to move out to West Texas, just because there's a lot of things going on in West Texas. And instead of standing up that another entity. They decided just to do it inside of that distribution LLC. So we came in, kind of reviewed the numbers, looked through the books that were a mess, and decided, hey, this is something we think we can get behind and do. So we bought as much of the stock as we could buy, and then took control for the most part through the operating agreement. So we had pretty much control over the business, even though we only own 42.5% technically. And we brought some working capital and really kind of just changed that whole business model up. One of our partners sold the location in Fort Worth to his partner, and then the other one in San Antonio. The partner there just got tired of working. He just basically closed down shop. They had quite a bit of money in the bank and just split the cash up and shut down shop. So we got out there and realized pretty quick that the model was broke, and we had to immediately do some changes. So we put in some pricing discipline just to make sure we're pricing stuff accordingly. We realized pretty quick that if we handled the sourcing of a lot of the stuff ourselves, we could increase margins pretty substantially. So we started sourcing a lot of the items ourselves and just kind of put our head down and figured we'd take a run at this thing for 5 or 6 years and see where we're at. We come up for air and kind of see where we're at. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, that's a awesome story of just, figuring it out, bringing in discipline. And how do you, like, obviously your brother-in-law and, your wife's wife's dad as well, like, how do you guys define those, roles? Obviously your brother-in-law is, CEO, your CFO, like, making sure this stuff gets done.
Yeah, we're very different, but think alike. So it was natural for us to kind of be in business together. So he's very much a team builder, the rah-rah guy. He knows how to put together a team of guys. He was a quarterback in high school, natural born, leader. So it made sense for him to be CEO, to go out and figure out, okay, how do we build a team around what we're doing? I'm the guy that's in the book saying, hey, can we make payroll? Can we, sell this at this dollar amount? How are we going to get, margin on this product? So naturally, we just kind of made our own swim lanes, if you will, just because of our strengths that we have together. And then our father-in-law was just advisor, for both of us. So if we had any kind of issues or questions or, what direction do we go, we'd bounce off of him and get some feedback on, what made the most sense. So we have 2 other partners that work in this business with us. One of the guys kind of handles logistics at this point, so to make sure we have all the tank ordered, make sure they're going to the right places. So he's handling all the logistics around the tanks. Another partner is more into sales, customer relations, so he spends a lot of time taking guys hunting and fishing and lunches and things like that. My brother-in-law really oversees human resources and overall kind of growth direction, and then I just naturally just keep the thing afloat with the numbers. So we all kind of have our own areas of expertise. Try to meet pretty frequent to make sure we're all on the same page with stuff. But Aaron and I kind of have control for the most part of what ultimately happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that must be, just fun getting to be in business, with 3 other folks and just growing a business. And what do people need tanks and pumps for? I think it'd be good just to kind of explain to the audience, as I've got some exposure to it, but definitely, a niche part if you're not from, Texas or.
Yeah, I mean, we knew nothing about it coming in. My background, we've already talked about. My brother-in-law's background was in HR basically his entire career. So we had no exposure at all to oil and gas for the most part, but pretty steep learning curve. We came up to speed pretty quick, but typically when these production companies drill these holes, they may have $20 million to drill a hole for oil, and they put, casing down this hole that they just drilled. A lot of times there's a corrosive gas that comes out of that, and that corrosive gas will basically eat through that casing, and if it eats through that casing, you lose the hole. So they spent $20 million, drilling this well. If they lose the casing, they got to go, rework that entire well. And And then on top of that, they can't sell this oil and stuff unless it's been treated, if you will. So there's a lot of large chemical companies that all they do is they sell chemical. And this chemical, different components of it kills different type of gases. What we sell is the tanks and the pumps to push that chemical downhole. So these chemical companies, they just want to sell their chemical. It's a recurring revenue stream. They price it by the gallon, and they just show up, fill tanks, and go to the next one. But basically, our product is what holds the chemical, and then the pumps, keep that chemical going downhole.
Yeah, that must have been definitely a steep learning curve, and really really cool but nichey business.
Very niche. Yep.
Very, and like definitely very cyclical. If I'm guessing, most of your consumers are probably oil and gas. What's obviously everything going on in like the Middle East? How has that kind of affected your guys' business right now?
Yeah, it has in a way, but also it hasn't. A lot of these production companies at this point are pretty sophisticated, and they have their budgets pre-built in advance. The price of oil does matter, but for the most part, the small fluctuations throughout the year don't really affect them because they've already have their money budgeted for the year. They start tightening up if they anticipate that it's going to fall below X, call it below $40 a barrel for a long period of time. They'll start buckling down and saying, "Hey, we're going to manage our expenses as best we can." But we really have two customers. We have production companies are our customers, and the chemical companies are our customers. And depending on that contractual relationship between the chemical company and production company is how we get paid. So we'll put a product together, put it in the field. Sometimes we have to split bill depending on who's responsible for what. But we're pretty far removed from the actual drilling of the wells because even these assets that have been drilled years ago may still have to have chemical going down hole. So we're somewhat insulated from the ups and downs of the oil prices. With that said, if oil prices are higher, they're drilling more. It's definitely more opportunity for us.
Yeah, that makes sense, and almost like a picks and shovels to the gold rush, and less more downside protection, and then when it's great, you're going to be doing great. And how roughly how big, how many employees are you guys now? Obviously, you've been there for what, 6 years, 7 years or so. Like growing with the business, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when we came on, it was just us. No employees, no vehicles, nothing. It was basically just us. I think they may have been doing $1 million in revenue at the time, somewhere in there. We finished up last year, I think 26 million top line. I think we have close to 40 employees, 35, 40 employees, somewhere in there. 2 locations. Hopefully we'll get a third stood up here pretty quick. But it's just been boots to the ground, growing as fast as we can grow type thing.
Yeah, that must be amazing. Just seeing it grow from 4 guys figuring it out, not knowing anything, and becoming more sophisticated, and looking to grow into a third office must just be fun, and having a family with the coworkers as well.
Yeah, I mean that's a big piece. I mean we got a lot of young guys that work for us. A lot of them don't have family, father figures in their life, so just being able to give them some direction, give them some opportunity to be successful is a huge blessing.
Yeah, must be great. Just paying it forward, and showing someone the right way to do things, and hopefully they can do a business on their own in the future because
Absolutely, yep.
you taught them the right way. And I know as you're doing alpha tanks and pumps, you're also a partner with your wife's vet care. Like how is that as well? Must be just fun being on both sides of the business, or in 2 different businesses, I should say.
Yeah, that's the vet space is a very unique space. So my wife's got a pretty large following online, all the different platforms, and she works emergency medicine. She works for a large, it's called Veterinary Emergency Group. So she has a unique role with them where she spends half of her time doing marketing, speaking. She goes around and travels to all the vet schools, talking to vet students, pre-vet students, and then she works around 6 shifts a month inside of the emergency room. She's always had a desire to own her own hospital, and we had opportunity probably 4 years ago or so to buy the oldest hospital here in Keller. I think it's been around for about 40 years. Had two owners, and somebody reached out to us and asked if we were interested, and we said we'll take a look at it. So we're able to build that, remodel it, hire some new vets, hire some new technicians, and it's really kind of experiment. We try stuff, and if it doesn't work, we pivot and try something different. But she works there, a couple shifts a month, spends time, there as often as she can. But it's really just, trying to learn the space. It's a truly a community hospital, so we try to keep our prices as low as we can to help the community out. We don't take any money out of that hospital. Everything we make, we put back into it to grow it. So it's been fun. It's been anytime you work with your wife can be fun and challenging, and it's been all that. So.
Yeah, definitely fun and challenging, and it must sometimes blur over the family parties.
It does. It does.
Interesting. Must be definitely interesting. And I know like private equity in particular, when I was doing a little like sourcing on my own, and I spent a lot of time in, like the pet care space. So, think doggy daycares.
Yeah.
Vet care roll-ups are the biggest thing, Mission Healthcare or Mission
Yep.
Pet Care,
Yep.
Shore Capital. Do you have like private equity firms, calling you every single day, be like, come on, sell me your business? Like that must
Yeah. Every day there's, all the, and again, my wife's fairly well known in the industry, so she goes to all the conferences. So we get people, coming up all the time, asking if we're ready to sell. At some point we will be, but it's not anytime soon. Our goal with this one was to really understand, what does the market look like? How do we grow something that they could be successful? You got a single doctor practice trades at a 5-6x, and then if you get multi-doctor practices, that can jump up to 10 to 13x. Our thought going in was we would just go around and gobble up a bunch of single doctor practices, package that thing up, and then at some point, sell it in the future. I think we learned pretty quick that it's not as easy to do that as we thought it would be. There's a lot of hand holding. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into that GP practice. We do have a new concept coming out. We're working on right now to expand kind of our footprint in the pet space. So hopefully in the next couple of months we'll have that up and running, and I think that's one that we can scale pretty quick. So we're looking forward to that next phase as well.
Yeah. What exactly is it?
It's still a little bit confidential, but it's we're starting to see more of these kind of pop up throughout the U.S., and it's a kind of our spin on a unique model. So
cool. Well, definitely stay tuned. That's super exciting there. Yeah, I feel like one thing that I've realized just from working in, the private equity spaces and like reading all these decks, that all a big part of their strategy is M&A. We're going to have this nice platform, and then we're just going to acquire, 20 million in EBITDA, and then we're going to exit. It sounds great, but like you said, boots on the ground. Is it that easy? Am I really going to want to sell? Probably not.
Yeah, when we start looking at the actual numbers, I mean, especially when private equity gets involved, they're going to do a 80-20 split, 75-25 split. So now you've lost control. You still have quite a bit of your money tied up in this business. You're probably going to be working harder than you were before you sold it. There's still a lot of unknowns, even with the oil and gas space. We've had some people knocking on the door, and it's you start really putting numbers on paper, and you're just like, does this make sense? They want you to carry a note, and they want you to do some earn-outs. I think they get a little bit greedy sometimes, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, definitely with the earnouts too. I've heard some like horror stories there where it's like, 80% of it's in earnouts, and then it all goes south, and then the owners are left with everything. Definitely sometimes too they have great partnerships and results for everyone.
And there is, and I think there's definitely a right environment for everybody to get into, and I think the right partner came along, and there was a deal that made sense. We would contemplate it, we would think it through, but just some of the stuff that kind of been presented is just so out in left field, where it's like it just doesn't make sense for us. I mean, we got too good of a thing going, to do that. And I think a lot of, even in the vet space, we've got a lot of doctors that sold out to some of these groups, um, basically kept a majority of their money tied up in the new, umbrella company that was going to go public at some point in the future, and most of their value was, dropped to substantially lower than what it was, out of the gate. So um, the vet space, some of the stuff's kind of pulled back a little bit. We don't see near the EBITDA numbers we were seeing early on. They're still there for the right hospitals, but some of that's pulled back quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. My brother's at a preschool roll up,
Hmm.
and they're 110 million in EBITDA, so like a behemoth. One of like his like, some of his like senior management there, it's all tied up in the next exit. But the thing is, like, who's going to be able to buy a 110 EBITDA platform? That has to go public in my mind, unless they're going to lose a bunch of money. But they're probably going to put in a CV, and someone's going to get the short end of the stick. That's my guess for like all these huge middle market, upper middle market deals.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of, we've got some buddies that have sold some pretty large businesses, and there was multiple capital raises, and everybody gets diluted a little bit. There's been some unique things going on. Some of those mid markets, like you said, they get so big that the only next step is for private equity to come in and take somebody out and grow it to the next spot. So some of these, early movers, private equity, have to get out in 5 years, and they'll just sell it to the next private equity that comes in, and kind of keeps rolling with it. So
Yeah, I'm new to the private equity space, but it's crazy. It's just like it gets retraded to a new private equity and
yeah,
this, and it's just like when is that growth gonna somehow stop? Like, someone's story is not gonna work out for them. But I hope it works out for where I'm working.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so usually the last question that I always talk, it's an NPR podcast that inspired me. It's how I built this. But one of the questions they always ask is, how much of your success so far do you think is from, being in the right place at the right time, marrying the right person, or in luck, and how much of it do you think is just, working your ass off, working 80 hours a week, you know, just grinding, and the hard work.
Yeah, I think it's a split. I mean, I think with one without the other, you're swimming upstream. So I think you have to work your ass off, but you also have to be a little bit lucky. Without either one of those, you're in trouble. I would say my whole career has been a little bit of both. Just being in the right place at the right time, but also not afraid to jump when the time's right to jump. A lot of people get comfortable and they don't want to make that move, and you can't be like that, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You've got to be able to make decisions pretty quick. Sometimes without all the information, you can take a calculated risk as best you can, but sometimes you only can make a decision based off the information you have in front of you and make that decision and go. So I think a lot of it is being at the right place at the right time, but also working your ass off and taking a little bit of risk.
Yeah, definitely a bit of both. If you ain't taking that risk, I'm a big believer in like fortune favors the bold. It's like
That's right.
savings. Because if you don't take that risk, and if you were staying in that managing director job, probably you'd be making what, 600 now, which is great money. You wouldn't
So,
have that time with your kids.
yeah, a lot of mine was based off of sales too. So if something dried up and you're not selling, you're not making any money either. So you never know.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows? That's in the past. And then the last question, like, what kind of motivates you for the future?
I think my kids, trying to figure out, we've never really talked about retirement in the past. My wife and I just finally started having a conversation about what does retirement look like to us, and when does that actually, when do we even think about that? And we probably have another 10 or 12 year, runway in front of us. So I think a lot of it now is figuring out, okay, what do we do to help make sure our kids are in the right environment to be successful at some point in the future? If they want to be painters or artists, or want to come work in the family business or go be doctors, how do we put them in a position to be successful? So I think a lot of what we do today is to be able to provide for them, and give them that opportunity, but also teach them how to be entrepreneurs, how to be owners, how to be good employees. And that's kind of what kind of keeps us going. And that's probably for the next 10 years is How do we build that nest egg to help support them? At the same time, make sure we support, the people who work for us. We probably have between the two businesses 50 or 60 people that, rely on us for, food on their table and roof over their heads. Yeah, that's the motivation that kind of keeps us going.
Yeah, that must be, a great responsibility and honor as well. Get into, you know, feed people and, build a business, build community, build friendships, and, just lifelong friends. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on here, Shane. Really enjoyed telling your story and, can't wait to see all the success you have in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, bud. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Making of, hosted by Jack Pitts. And thank you so much for Shane for coming on for the podcast and sharing your story with our audience. And if you guys enjoyed, please subscribe and leave a 5-star. It really helps our podcast grow. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I can't wait to share the next episode with you. Thanks so much and have a great, blessed rest of your day. Bye.